Hi everyone, welcome back from the weekends and welcome to another Break for 8 for Dementia Care Partners, where we do about 8 minutes of dementia education and 8 minutes of some kind of meditation or relaxation exercise. So today I would like to spend a few minutes talking about embarrassing situations. You know, unfortunately, this is something that you will undoubtedly encounter, somewhere on your dementia journey. How to work through a situation where your person may have said something or acted in a way that you or others may consider, socially inappropriate, right? So I think a story is in order here, and I'm sure you all have stories or situations you can tell. Feel free to put those in the comments. But I think stories help illustrate a point better because, they're my real life experiences, which I really hope helps make these tips and techniques seem just a little bit more realistic to you because, they're tried and true. I've tried them, I've used them. So my story here goes. One of my very favorite clients, I'm going to call her Sue. She's since passed, sadly, but she was living with what initially was diagnosed as early onset Alzheimer's. But I think as time went on and her condition began to kind of reveal itself more clearly, I think Sue actually was experiencing symptoms of frontotemporal dementia, or FTD. So, and unfortunately, for FTD and other forms of dementia that aren't Alzheimer's disease, because Alzheimer's is, the most common form, but sometimes for those other forms, an inaccurate diagnosis is not all that uncommon. But that's, maybe another story for another time, another session of ours. So back to Sue. Sue had an absolute heart of gold. She was a former teacher and an artist, and I know she must have just loved up her students a lot. She just had this great deal of love and compassion inside of her. But one of Sue's symptoms was a loss of awareness how to act in social situations, when she was interacting with others. So as her condition progressed, she lost more and more access to her ability, really, to remember the rules of engagement, so to speak, right? And at the same time, she was also becoming increasingly more impulsive and compulsive, which is a common symptom we see in FTD. So, for example, Sue would be so fixated on making a purchase when she was at a store or at a coffee shop. She would crowd the person in front of her in line. She kind of had lost that awareness for personal space. And, she didn't really recognize when the other person's kind of nonverbal signs of discomfort, like they would move up, a little bit away from her, and she would just, move up with them, so she continued to crowd them. So, also another thing of Sue's, so the teacher in her sometimes came out in the form of, I guess I'd call it unsolicited advice, because she was, such a kind and concerned person. She considered her advice as being really vital for that other person's well-being. So here are a few examples of this. So Sue would approach people who were walking their dogs, and then she would lecture them on the importance of always, always, always keeping their dogs leashed, because, while her memory for navigating social experiences wasn't so great, Sue did remember a time where she saw a dead animal on the side of the road. So that was apparently, traumatic and dramatic enough for her to stick with her in her mind. So that's why she always wanted to remind dog owners, to be extra cautious, right? Because she was worried about their animals being killed. So here's another thing that happened with Sue. So Sue's mom sadly had passed away from diabetes. And she also had a really close friend who was dealing with some pretty, terrible effects of diabetes. So Sue became kind of hyper focused on sugar intake and health supplements. And sometimes when she would see someone who was a little bit overweight or heavier, she would approach them and she would give them some nutritional information. So, sometimes I could see it coming, but Sue was so impulsive that there was really little I could do to stop her when she got something in her head, or, more dangerously, actually trying to, or a few times where she actually tried to jump out of my car when it was still moving because she was so focused and eager to get to our destination. She'd see the place, especially the coffee shop, and she would, be ready to go before we even hit the parking lot. So while most of Sue's actions were a little bit embarrassing, they weren't actually dangerous except for maybe that car situation. So how do we handle embarrassing situations like this? And I think, the key thing to remember is that, like Sue, a person who's exhibiting a decline in social skills, it's not because they've suddenly become rude or inconsiderate. It's just that their brain no longer can access, the complex thinking skills that are involved in navigating social situations, because let's face it, those skills are quite nuanced, right? They require a degree of judgment, meaning how we gauge a situation and then how we decide how we're going to respond to that situation. So these cognitive skills are more sophisticated, a higher level thinking skills, and they take a long time for us to learn them, for those to develop. And then, while some people living with dementia retain their ability to engage and interact appropriately, especially if they have, they're very outgoing, maybe they're a salesman type. But others, especially those with FTD, lose access to these skills more quickly. So the embarrassing things they may say, that just to remember, is that, it's not intentional, right? It's due to a change in the brain or changes in the brain. So the second piece of advice, just quickly I have, is to try to determine, what's the reason for what you're seeing? What's the reason behind it? And I know Sue really well, just like you know your person really well, and I knew she wasn't intentionally trying to insult someone, right? She just was very kind-hearted and deeply concerned about the wellness of others, including animals. And the third thing to keep in mind is, if there's no way to control the actions of your person, because it's the disease process that's really the root cause of it, there usually are ways that we can adapt the situation to make things more safe or a little bit less embarrassing. So here's how I adapted the situation for Sue. So when we were in a checkout line, I would make sure that I kind of got there first and positioned myself in between Sue and the person in front of us in line. So Sue would crowd me like she was like basically on top of me, but she wouldn't be crowding them. And then secondly, I asked her to sit in the back seat of my car. So in the back seat, I became kind of her chauffeur, right? But I could activate child safety locks there, so she could not jump out of the car until we stopped. I actually had to go around and open the door for her. But for situations where Sue became, overly friendly, or she doled out that unsolicited advice, I tried a few things. Number one, I would, try to kind of steer her away from people she might, be more likely to address. I would redirect her attention to something else, kind of in hopes that she kind of wouldn't spot them. But number two, if she did get into a conversation with somebody, oftentimes they quickly understood that Sue had a cognitive issue, and I wouldn't intervene most most times people were just very, very kind. And we went to the same places a lot, so people became pretty familiar with Sue. But number 3, I started carrying this card with me, like a little business card, and it said, the person I'm with is living with dementia. You know, it also said she needs extra time to speak and respond to your questions, and just another statement like your patience, you know, and understanding is appreciated, something like that. So, so with, you know, her spouse's permission, you know, when these awkward situations came up, you know, I could show the card, and always things were just diffused. So you can find similar cards all over the internet. Just go Google it. You know, there are a ton of vendors that sell these, like on Amazon or Etsy, or you can even design something that is really tailor-made for, you know, your person, and just put it on a business card. You know, this one, for example, says, you know, the person I'm with has Alzheimer's. They may repeat themselves, have trouble answering questions, be a bit too friendly, get scared or upset easily, and on the back it has a few tips. This one is, you know, I have a condition called early dementia. Please be patient. I may repeat questions, forget what you told me, you know, and so on and so on. What a great idea. You also can get little buttons too that your person can wear if they're a little bit, you know, further on in their dementia process, and they're not maybe so aware. You know, it just says I have dementia. So it kind of just depends on, you know, what you in your person think is best. So of course I would advise, if you're with somebody that's not a family member, or you're not their, you know, healthcare power of attorney, or if you're a healthcare professional and you're out and about with a person, you know, make sure you clear it with the responsible party before you show this type of thing, because of course, you know, you'd be disclosing your client's medical information, their diagnosis, to people without the right permission. So just make sure you have that permission. So just to sum up, embarrassing situations, you know, they're going to happen, right? So just please remember, please remember, it's dementia that's to blame and not your person. And many times there's really nothing you can do to control what they say or do, but you know, as you get to know your person's idiosyncrasies, you're going to begin to anticipate situations where embarrassing things might come up. So, you know, you can just begin to adjust your approach, redirect them, or, you know, if all else fails, use a little card. Because the truth of the matter is, dementia, it should not mean that we just have to hide away for the rest of life, right? Because it is possible to still get out and engage with the communities and live well with dementia. For right now, though, it's time for our meditation part of the segment. So please, put your coffee cup down. Make sure you're in a quiet spot where you won't be interrupted, because this time is for you. So just get comfy, close your eyes if you like. Just going to unweight yourself from the load that you're carrying. One of the simplest ways we can kind of redirect our focus, clear our mind, and return to the present moment is just to draw our attention to our breath. So please just begin to focus in on your breath. Nothing to do but just, attend to the rise and the fall of your body as you breathe in and you breathe out. If any thoughts enter your mind, it's okay. Just allow them to pass through. You can always go back to them later. If any noises from your environment, or any other distractions arise, just allow them to be there. You can take care of those later too. Just allow your breath to take you to a place of greater peace. Peace and stillness. Oftentimes in dementia care, there are many, many things that are beyond our control. Especially when they involve the things our person may say or do. The familiar serenity prayer that many of you may know tells us to, in so many words, let go of those things we can't control. To be mindful of things we can change and things that are beyond our ability to change. So sometimes when you're finding yourself butting up against the resistance of other people or other circumstances that won't budge, that won't move in the direction you want them to move in. Sometimes letting go of the desire to change, to keep pushing, can be the way through. So just allow your breath to keep you in this place of stillness and peace. And on your exhale, use that exhale to release anything that you've been holding onto a little bit too tightly. It may be something you're not even completely aware of. So take a deep breath in, fill up the bottom of your lungs first. Hold that breath at the top for a moment, and then just release that breath, emptying your lungs completely. Let's do that again. Big inhale, holding at the top for a moment, and then at your own speed exhaling and emptying those lungs completely. And as you do, just letting go of any pressure that you're placing on yourself to control things, to be perfect, to appease others. The list is long. So stick with this breathing technique a few more times, just clearing your field of all the extra pressure. And when you're ready, just return to that gentle breath. I am going to play the music out a little bit longer, so please feel free to just sit here, enjoying this peaceful place. And I will see you next time.